somebody who is struggling with binge eating or emotional eating, which is probably the most common type of woman that I work with, they may think that they need to get control over the food that they're eating. Because if you've ever binge eat, have you ever experienced a binge or emotional eating?
In my 20s, yeah,
Okay.
because of restriction. And
Yes.
what I found too, and this is what kind of led me into a real spiritual space with food, is it would only happen on the full moon and new moon.
Oh,
So it was
interesting.
only happening in this 2-day window connected to the full moon and new moon. And it had a lot to do with food restriction. And as soon as I healed, did the spiritual work to figure out what it is I was connected to moonwise,
Mm,
and spiritually and past life, and I stopped any food restriction,
mhm, mhm,
it's like it never happened. That
mhm.
feels and so for anyone that's having issues with food right now, I can tell you, like, that feels like a lifetime ago. Like, I
Mm,
can't even remember that
yeah.
because it's so far in my past now because it's so healed.
Well, so many women have experienced that same thing, especially in your 20s. It seems to kind of run rampant. And
Yeah.
when you're experiencing it, it feels like you have no discipline around food. You might eat really clean during the day, and then all of a sudden at night or in the afternoon, it's like this force comes over you, and you're
Yeah.
just going to eat whatever's in your path, usually the food you've told yourself you can't have. And it creates this spiral of then so much shame and negative self-talk and feeling guilty. And most people then say, like, okay, tomorrow I'm eating clean, or tomorrow I start fresh, or tomorrow I'm starting the cleanse. What you said is so important, that the number one thing that causes binge eating is restriction. And restriction, like every single diet, is a form of restriction. So at
Yeah.
some point, we are on this path and we begin to dislike our body or want to change a part of ourselves. And diet culture in our society is like, perfect, here's a diet to try. Restrict carbs or restrict fats or whatever. And so
Yeah.
we do that and it works for a bit. There's no doubt about it. Like, people will lose weight. We've seen the before and after pictures. Your body will change, but it's not sustainable. And the challenge is that the restriction actually causes our body to move into a space where we're far more vulnerable to binge eating, emotional eating, and just completely disconnecting from our hunger and fullness cues, to be honest. Because now we've tied up what we're eating and when we're eating with all these rules, like, I don't eat this type of food, or I only eat between 12 and 6 p.m. All
Mhm.
of that restriction is actually what is causing the binge eating. So one of the first things I'll work with clients is like, we've got to stop the restriction, which can feel very scary for a binge eater or emotional eater, because they're like, if I stop restricting, I'm just going to eat all the things. I'll gain endless weight and my skin will start breaking out, and I'll just never stop eating the food that I'm eating, which couldn't be further from the truth. But it can feel really good to have support around it, obviously. So I mean, all of this is my life's work. It's what I'm so passionate about because I've spent so many years in that space myself, and I know how much stress and havoc it wreaks on not only your physical well-being but also your confidence and self-esteem. It's very complicated because a lot of the things that we deem as being healthy and that we call wellness can actually become very disordered depending on the intention that is behind it, depending on how your body reacts to it. So, another example of this that doesn't have anything to do with intuitive eating is cold plunging. I know for me, as somebody who tends to run a bit more anxious, that sometimes cold plunging can be incredible. It is like, I feel my mind clear. I feel my nervous system move out of fight flight and into rest digest. Cold plunging really works for me in the summer months when it's warmer. But in the
Mhm.
winter in Vancouver, it is cold and rainy and damp. And I'm a long and lean individual, doesn't have a ton of body mass. And with my body type, going in cold water in that type of environment, I end up getting sick. Like, my body's not in a space to be able to handle that. With cold plunging as well, if you're a female, there are certain types of your cycle where it can be more doing more harm than good. And
Yeah.
so I think what I'm saying is if we are not in tune with our body, if we are not able to listen to the cues of our body, then we're constantly sourcing external wisdom from other individuals about what works for their body, and it might not be right for us. So the first thing we have to do is come home to our body and start to listen to the signals, start to tune into hunger and fullness, start to tune into energy levels, start to tune into somatic blocks that may be happening in our body. And from there, we can really tune into a whole new level of vitality and wellness.